That's right. Well, why? Why not? You did? Yeah.
Cynthia's not here now.
Did you win?
Yep. I'm quit. I quit. I'm going home. I got a new car.
You won 2 more times to play again. Congratulations. Ooh. Oh, yeah, we're on. So, Pat, are you all ready to go and ready to fly? Okay. So, yeah. So I'm not quite sure where Councillor Rob went to, but we'll call the meeting to order. Just to give everyone some idea on format tonight, we'll be going to 8:30. Everyone's put in a full day already, so by that time they're feeling a little blank. We'll take a break around 7 o'clock for 5 minutes, so Pat can catch her breath and relax her hands and do some Tai Chi. So, aside from the agenda, there are no additions. However, there will be a little switcheroo. So the fire department will move up to where administration is, and administration will move down to where the fire department currently is because Pat's away. That's about it, Andrea? Perfect. So with that, can I have an approval of the agenda?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have 1 set of minutes, February 16th. Any errors or omissions?
Move adoption.
Any discussion?
Just
We just don't. Yep.
one item for discussion. I just oh God, in the wrong spot. 1 second. There we go.
Just want to make sure that people keep their mics on as well because we're taping.
Sorry. Yes. Just on under new business 2.1, it's software developer Clive Freundlich was only had limited availability to provide support to staff. I just wanted clarification. Was that he wasn't available, or that we directed to use him minimally?
He was not available. Now, a little background on that. When I first started, he was pushing to be signed up basically as a full-time budget consultant, and I said at that point we didn't have budget to have him here certainly to the extent he was here last year, but I did ask him if he could be available, say, 1 day a month, and we barely have had that, so it has been tough. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Was there any business arising from the minutes, Andrea?
Yes, there were. So there is a short list here, and the first question, and this one will go over to Jenn. Councillor Martin asked what the surplus or deficit was for 2013, and Jenn advised that she would have that information available for the next meeting.
Thank you. So with respect to the non-consolidated surplus, so this isn't the figure that you see directly on the audited financial statements, but 2013's non-consolidated surplus was just shy of $2 million. And this was allocated as follows. We had an increase in our investment in our tangible capital assets of just over $400,000. We had an increase in our various reserve fund balances of just under $500,000. We had an increase in our general surplus of just over $1 million. And I believe Councillor Martin had wanted to know about 2012. Similar, we had a non-consolidated surplus of $2 million, and that was allocated in 2012. $750,000 was invested into our tangible capital assets. We actually drew down on our general surplus by the tune of $600,000, and we then increased our reserve fund balance in 2012 by almost $2 million. So we were averaging a surplus each year of about $2 million. But that includes transfers to reserves.
Thank you. Rob?
So was that the transfers? Were were they planned transfers, or were they unexpected transfers?
For the most part, these were not budgeted for.
Yeah.
They arose because of various reasons. And looking back to 2012, I'd have to pull the financial plan to see exactly.
And I guess that's the one challenge I'm having is that we're over $2 million of unaccounted budgeting that, you know, we budgeted for it and we never spent it, and it was good that we're able to get it into the reserves, but it really has a major effect if we're not anticipating to move those monies into the reserves. We're really overtaxing our taxpayers if we're creating these surpluses. So I'm just wondering, why are we so off? Like $2 million is a significant amount of dollars to be off from a budgetary standpoint.
I can help out there. We don't have the 2012 figures, Councillor Martin, because we really didn't think we were going that far back in time. That wasn't your question. It was 2013.
Yeah.
So we did budget for transfers to reserves in 2013 of 1.7 million.
Okay.
So we came in.
Only 300.
Yeah, we came in very close
Okay,
to that.
good. That's what I wanted.
We're not awash in cash, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go under old business.
And I have a further
Oh,
few
sorry.
items there. Yeah. So the second, I basically went through the minutes, and where we had questions, I've pulled them out. So the second item was that staff were directed to investigate the UBCM Regional Communities to Communities grant and report back to committee. And first, I have to thank Councillor Day for providing some information. And my part of the investigation was that I checked with Helen Lockhart in engineering, and apparently we had actually applied for a grant, and the issue was the First Nations did not respond or weren't available. Is that correct? I'm just looking at our engineer over there, but there definitely was an effort made, and it did not pan out because of the other party, I don't think, participated.
Cynthia?
I just want to add that the application was made and we were successful, but that was way back in 2008. So it is a long time ago. And I would say that the political landscape has changed quite a bit with First Nations since then.
Yeah, so that's the first part. So the second part now is, Ian is not here. I don't know, Ifo, if he's briefed you, but I know that the Planning Department was looking into reapplying for this grant. Okay, so that one, if Ian does come back to the meeting this evening, we can ask him later if that's okay.
Carol?
I'm not sure that Ian's back in the meeting, but I know that we are staying. There has been talk about doing that. We are, as Councillor Day has indicated, a lot closer, and relationships have changed in there. So there may be a greater opportunity to get this actually taken.
I know the Planning Department is looking into it. So I just don't have
They've been running it right from 2011 that I know of for sure.
So the next item that came out of the minutes, staff were directed to prioritize the special project list and provide funding sources. And we do have a replacement page for that because we realized due to some other urgent items, this had not showed up the way we wanted it to. We have the funding sources and priorities. And so we will get to that on the agenda this evening when we get to that particular item.
Great.
The fourth old business item, committee discussed whether the Havenwood Park Bridge was included in the tangible capital item. And Mr. McCusker was going to look into that, and I'm looking to our engineer, and whether you know. Okay. I believe it was included. This came up as part of our TCAs, and when we get to that section tonight, we might refresh ourselves as to what that question was again. And the fifth question was Councillor Nault wanting to know why payment was spread over 15, 17, and 18 for the international crane truck. Good question, Councillor Nault. That was an error. The only item that should have been in there was $175,000 for the current year, which we're expecting. So we were quite happy to slice out some additional 2 items there. So we're already winning on that department. And that's it for old business.
Great, thank you. So that takes care of 3.1 and 2, or are we going into that as well?
So now,
The revised.
with special projects, I wonder if somebody, either of you have a minute, we'll just hand these out, because I don't believe we've done this.
And this is the information that's replacing tab 3?
This is replacing, which is your special projects? Is it tab 3?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I'd like you to do now.
For the 5 years, right? For 2015
Yes,
to 19.
tab 3, yeah. Just be careful if you've made notes on that before you
Yeah.
throw them on. But you might have some precious notes in there.
What tab is this again, sir?
3. You back with us?
I'm back with you now.
What's the date today? 25th.
I'm taking the old thing out.
Yep. Just be careful in case he made some notes on. So
Okay.
Princess here doesn't think he needs to use
I
his
just
old,
saw him making a paper airplane out of the old one, yes.
Oh, it's
Don't
not.
forget about your pink shirt there.
That's right.
No bullying.
Okay.
Me?
Shut up.
Okay, all right. So what we have done here is, in terms of the prioritization with some of the departments, the smaller ones, we did not spend a lot of time on that. Where we've done the prioritization is in the engineering department, okay, because that's where the big buck items were. And we have also trimmed back a few of the items or moved them into operating. So the first department that you see there is admin, and I don't know if council has any specific direction. Frankly, I looked at that. It's not a lot of money. The first 3 items, we already have the funding in place. It was taxed for last year. So my personal recommendation is that they should go forward. And the only other item is the heritage artifact storage, and that is a new item from taxes. So if we can take it maybe one department at a time, what I was going to suggest is I don't know if you want to make a motion for each department as we go through the special projects, or if you want to wait till we're done the entire workbook.
We should probably ratify each department just to keep
Okay.
it clean.
And if you think I'm jumping ahead, the other thing I can point out to you, which is probably quite important, is at the very back is where the money's coming from to help you with your decision making. So we have given you a little bit more information here. And the reason this is important is because a lot of these projects, very few of them have an impact in taxation. At the back of page 2, the first sets of numbers, the first table you see, we're planning on spending $803,800, and of that amount, $95,800 is taxation. So that is the number that has the direct impact on the tax lift. Is everybody with me? Just flip over the first page.
Right here. Yeah.
And the other items in there, for instance, a grant amount of $415,000. $186,000 of that in the table below, we've actually broken out the grants so you can see exactly what we're meeting by grants. $186,000 is gas tax, and conditional federal grants of $229,000. That gives you your grant total. So that's over 50% of the funding for your special projects will not be affecting reserves or having a direct impact on taxation. So that's important to note.
Just on that, where, I know not for gas tax, but some grants require matching, is that identified?
Yes, and in that case, the 1/3 could be from taxation here. Yes, that's correct. So important to keep that in mind, but we have added a column here, all the things in green for money, where the money's coming from for each project, okay? So I'm hoping that's helpful. So I may ask you, Mr. Chair, if you have a preference how you'd like to deal with this. we brought it back for information. You may decide to not make any decisions right now till we've gone through some of the workbooks. Or you may want to have some questions of staff in terms of some of the things, how they were prioritized.
Okay. Does the committee have a preference? Which way to go? Did you want to review this list first and go through the workbooks?
Yeah, I think I need to go through the work.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
There you go.
So I've touched on the admin department, so I'm going to go department by department if that's acceptable.
Yep.
A number of items we have moved out of here and incorporated because we considered them part of our core budget, I believe. Jen, I'm just looking at the different software has been moved off of here. Oh, okay. Okay, so we can ignore that. Okay, next up then is the communications section. And, yeah. Because in some of these cases it's pulling possible funding sources, I think, Jen. I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, that's right. I know what's going on here. We haven't shown you the 2014, the previous year, and this is pulling the funding sources from those previous year's projects. So sorry about that. That's why you're seeing nothing there. It's related to a previous year.
So we made a contribution to the Regional Housing Trust Fund last year?
No, it was up for consideration in the budget last year, and council made the decision not to provide funding.
So next year that line item will disappear.
Yes.
Essentially,
Yeah.
you won't see it anymore. Okay. Good.
I'm pretty sure that the sheet you had last week showed the 24 actuals because I'd wanted you to see what had been done and what hadn't. And it was really hard to figure out how much data to put on here, so apologies for that.
No, sorry, it's just me not understanding when we have nothing in there, why it's there.
Yeah, and that is why. It's related to a previous year's item.
Okay.
Okay, so communications, and we've tried to ensure we got this correct. I know I see that our communications manager, Sandra, is here. I believe we've made a change, Sandra, to ensure that both the community profile and the waterfront branding are clearly showing as coming from gas tax and not general taxation. I know that's very important in terms of ensuring that hopefully those projects go forward. So in the communications area then that leaves the events and the citizen survey as possible funding from taxation. Any questions or comments?
Jason?
Yes, being new on council, I have no idea what waterfront branding and promotion is. Could I have a brief explanation of why that costs $60,000 over 2 years?
Sandra?
That's the project we talked about in the last meeting, Jason. Signage along the waterfront. So cleaning up existing signage and standardizing it down along the waterfront. Looking at adding a welcome sign and some interpretive signage along the lagoon areas. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so if I don't have hear any further questions, with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll just go through each department.
Of course.
And then committee members can perhaps think about what they would like to do at the end of it.
Yep.
Building, let me have a look here. We have the City Hall seismic evaluation, which I believe we talked about last time. The microfiche, we already have money in hand to pay for that. That, to me, is something that should be a straightforward go ahead with it. And the IT hardware, there was a potential federal grant there. I'm not sure if our engineer, Mr. Baxter, would like to make any other comments, perhaps on the seismic evaluation. Oh, where did he go?
No. However, I think the chief building inspector spoke about that last week. Flo, did you have anything to?
I don't have anything to add from last week. If there's any questions, Mr. Chair, I'd gladly answer them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Rob, you betcha.
Well, just to the, I guess my question is, problems have been in past that my understanding is this building isn't healthy if there was an earthquake, right? And don't we already know that? So I guess I'm wondering, what's the point of us spending $10,000 to do an evaluation on something that we already know this building would fall down on if there was an earthquake?
To Councillor Martin through the chair. Unfortunately, we suspect that the building may not be up to the current code. The question that remains is, how far off the mark are we? My mandate as the chief building inspector is to ensure public safety, and my concern is that we have a building that's robust enough to allow the occupants to exit safely in the event of an earthquake. This is an unknown, and I feel it's important that we should know that. It's quite conceivable that the engineer may look at it and say, for example, that you don't meet 80% of the code. However, if you remove, say, for example, the concrete tile roof on top of the structure and replace it with lightweight roofing material, you'll have no problem. So it's an easy fix. My fear is that there might be some deeper seated issue that's not apparent. And I guess this is a decision that council's going to have to make to see, how far do you want to look into this building. Personally, I feel it's important that council have this knowledge so that they can plan forward into the future.
So essentially, this report will validate some assumptions that are out there, but also provide some solutions as well, right?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. They will analyze the building in today's code, and they will provide us with an order of magnitude cost should there be a need to do that.
Perfect. Thank you. Andrea.
Okay, so I'm looking for the engineer because the next, basically we have the rest of the set of items is engineering. There he is.
Oh.
Because I can't really speak to these, and I think this is where council may have some specific questions. That's not a problem. I've got copies of your list. Is that what you're after? I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
So I guess one question I would ask then, how are we prioritizing them? Like, is there a 1, 2, 3, 4 system, ABC system? Because I don't see a number beside each one. Okay. So I'm sure people are probably wondering. Excellent.
Yeah, while we're just getting there, I was wondering the same thing about the communications items, because there was a 1 beside everything that's on this list with communications. Does that mean they're all considered very important?
Sorry, that's not the prioritization on this side there. That's an accounting number of some sort. You guys next to the
Number,
admin communications engineering on the far right, that's an accounting number.
Where it says location?
Sorry, that has nothing to do with prioritization.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so yes, with apologies, we've got so much going on here. So over to you,
Okay,
engineer Mr. Baxter.
so this list is just things that appear in the engineering budget, and as they're the only ones prioritized, they'll probably be the only ones approved, I would think.
Okay, let the jockeying begin.
No, not seriously. So the way it was done was that priority ones are generally things where you don't have a realistic choice. Either it's a legal obligation or the risk of not doing it is excessive, and that's just our opinion, that we don't think you have a choice there, but your opinion may be different. And then after that, it was, trying to sort of assess what's the most benefit to the municipality. So for instance, down as far as LED lights, which is 6, is things that we think help improve our revenues. The LED lights do that because they actually have a 7-year payback swap over to LEDs, you're getting your money back in 7 years, which is not bad for a government. And then risk mitigation, we've got that down at 7 because it's we think the risks are very small. But again, it's difficult to prioritize some of these things. You may have a different opinion on that. And then after risk mitigation, it's after an urban ecology plan, there is a lot less urgency in these things in terms of overall benefit to the municipality or risk mitigation or legal obligation. So I'm hoping that the reasoning beside each priority there is provides you with a good understanding of why each thing is in here. Most of these items, of course, are not tax items. And I'm sorry that we don't have the source funding on this list, which means you have to cross-reference it with your other list.
But we have, with respect, we do have the priorities written right beside the title on the sheet,
on
okay?
this list, but not on this list.
Yeah.
So.
But it does have your funding source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Rob?
Michael, where does this stuff fit in? For example, like the issues around the dam, and the issues that we're having up on top of Triangle Mountain with the private residence dam and that type of stuff. Is that in some other part of the budget? Is that in here? Is that under risk mitigation? Where does those type of things lie?
That's a good question on that one. We didn't actually put it in our budget.
Right.
It's debatable whether it's an engineering thing, but it depends whether the costs are going to be legal costs or what they're going to be, whether it actually gets fixed this year.
Right.
So
would that normally fall then under administration? Like if we're talking legal? If it was a legal issue, would that come under our budget, or I don't know?
To interpretation. I mean, it is a legal issue.
Right.
It's not something that we're doing to improve our infrastructure.
Okay.
Cynthia?
On here, there is the HVAC replacement down at number 13, which was considered important due to the age of the equipment, but it's on page 2 of 3 in the finance spreadsheet as from a grant with no money at all attached to it under public works. So I'm not sure if that's just in there because we already did it last year.
Question.
Okay. We'll have to look into that. There's one of two things there. Some of it was done last year. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
And I can't recall if we moved the rest of it into operating, considering it an operating amount. So for the record, if we can, we will double check on that.
And I would just, it just occurred to me, and I don't know if it may have occurred once to staff and they're busy with other things, but looking into whether that's a good long-term investment or not, or if maybe there's some other options out there with other technologies. It seems like we're replacing heating, ventilation, air conditioner units fairly regularly over the last few years, and I don't know what their lifespan is. Is there something better?
we actually, that's all part of a piece with the emergency generator, which we were sort of trying to work out together what's the best way of actually generating emergency power, and do we need to do something different with the HVAC units because they actually make you buy a bigger generator. They have peak power loadings that are so high we actually get penalized by BC Hydro because of them. And the problem is really that they all come on at once sometimes. and every time you do that, you get penalized. So we are looking into, and Emery have said we can do this quite cheaply, a system that would ensure that they can't all come on at once. That a maximum of 4, say, can come on at once. So we stay under a certain ceiling. I think it's 50 kilowatts. And if we can do that, we lower the size of the amount of emergency power we'd need to draw at any one time. So that's all part of a big equation, but we don't have the answers ready for this budget. And now we've taken the decision to move the emergency generator to next year anyway, but we still want to come up with the overall answer.
So just a suggestion, our solar power program generated an awful lot of work for a number of local companies, and I just wonder if some of them might be interested in helping us do an evaluation.
The company that would be the most likely to be able to help us, which is West Bay, thank you. West Bay Mechanical. They actually got very little out of the program. They got maybe 10 installs because there's more lucrative work for them. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, Andrea?
Okay, and we've just answer here. The HVAC is actually over on the TCA sheet, so we will get to that.
Okay.
So the only clarification I'd like to make on the priorities is on when you flip the page over on the special projects. At 7 a.m. this morning, I hadn't had enough coffee. Subdivision development bylaw is number 4. We omitted that priority right at the top on the back of there. Subdivision.
Sorry. What
Subdivision, just special projects, flip it over, very top. Subdivision development bylaw should be priority 4. The next 2 were not prioritized, neither was engineering office changes because that's a couple years out. DCC bylaw you can see is 3, and the HVAC, which you've got is 13, and the reason we were confused is that's over on the tangible capital assets, which staff was not required to prioritize at the last budget meeting.
Yeah, there are other changes, like it shows the LED lights is not prioritized. And they're prioritized at 6.
LED lights. Is that on the tangible capital assets?
No, it's at the bottom here, but it's called carbon offset funds here.
Oh,
Oh,
Like
see,
what-
and I didn't know that.
And what
Yeah,
they are is LED. Okay.
so,
Error in translation. What
Okay.
we're doing with the carbon offset funds is buying replacement lights.
with the 17,250.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both amounts, the 14,000 and the 17,250.
so are those both number 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, first page? At the bottom, are the carbon offsets?
Oh, there.
Yeah, that's going to be the LED lighting.
I should mention the 2 at the top, the bridge repairs is one. I declined to prioritize that because my priority would be very low. But I know that the political priorities will take precedence over that. So I left it up to you fellas.
Thanks.
Yeah. Not being assassinated.
So I don't know if council wants to make any decisions on this section now that we've got the priority sheet and the list, or whether you want to hold off on that.
Yeah. There's definitely not a lot of room. There's only, $95,000 worth of tax
Yeah.
items and some reserve funds. So did folks want to continue on and have a look at the rest of our books, or make a decision on some of these items that are on the list? Cynthia?
Well, just for, and I can't find it now, wherever the bridge is gone. Because that's a large ticket item, and for me, it's not high on my priority list. I realize that people are accustomed to that being a through road, but maintaining it as a through road is very expensive, and I am it's downgraded, then so be it, because I feel that over the long term, more than likely, the bridge will be lost to sea level rise and climate change.
So, Michael, that's at the bottom under coastline erosion plans and implementation, right? That's priority one.
No, the bridge repairs is about 6 up from the bottom, 7 up from the bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry, 83, okay.
The 80, yeah, that's
My
it.
apologies. And what's the grant? Because I don't recall the grant.
I'm,
Fund
well,
balance.
that's because I think there was discussion last meeting, can't remember which meeting it was in, about applying for a grant under the risk disaster mitigation category of gas tax.
Okay.
And so that's what it's down as right now. We're packaging a whole bunch of things together and applying for one big lump sum and calling it a disaster mitigation plan for Colwood. And if we don't get that, then we would simply come back to you all and say, well, it's all eligible for our own gas tax fund, so do you want to proceed with it out of that fund?
So it doesn't have an impact on taxation at the moment?
No, it does not. And if we don't get the grant, it won't go ahead.
That it was previously shown as taxation,
Yeah.
so there's a benefit there in the new category.
Rob?
Thank you. Further down, third line from the bottom, bridge inspections. And maybe this is just the terminology of it, but that sounds like that's something that municipalities should do. Like, should we not be inspecting our bridges? Like, so, like, I guess I get kind of worried when I see that it's not prioritized. And I'm just wondering why it's not sort of built into our core that it's just that we're doing bridge inspections and there's a certain dollar amount that's budgeted every single year towards that. I guess
we do it every 5 years.
Okay.
And it doesn't fit the definition of core in the rules that each of the various treasurers that we've had have followed.
Right.
And so it never makes it to core, but in fact it is a core issue.
Yeah.
If
Not a
you look at
recurring
it.
expense.
And why is it not prioritized? I guess
I think I actually just overlooked it, but
Okay.
I will tell you that it was in last year's budget,
yeah.
so it's coming from funds brought forward.
So there should be no tax implications then? Did we already fund it?
No, that is one where we're trying to avoid the reserves and go for that big gas tax fund.
Okay.
But if not, there was reserves put away for it, and we've actually already put out the RFP,
Okay.
and we're about to award because it's just an ongoing thing from last year.
Andrea, I don't hear people lighting their hair on fire to cut stuff yet.
No, so, what we might want to do is just turn our attention to the next topic, if that's acceptable to committee.
Absolutely. So the reason this has just come back is to Which
provide
where are we at, sir?
TCA Section 4.
Thank you.
This is just to ensure that we had the funding source available for council's review. And again, just to remind you where the money is coming from to pay for these. It's about 4 pages over. And with the TCAs, and we're looking at almost $4 million worth, 2.35 million is debt related to sewer projects. 517,000 is grants. The majority of that is gas tax. And we have a contribution in hand already for 50,000, so no effect on reserves. And then the one item statutory reserves of 944,000. And there's a number of different reserves that would be coming out. I'm sorry, have I lost you? Yep. I'm on page 4 of the tangible capital assets, and I'm just doing an overview of where the money's coming from to pay for the almost $4 million worth of items on this list. And our discussion from last time, just to refresh our collective memories, was there was very little impact on taxation, if at all. I don't think, in this section. The indirect effect is if we're relying heavily on statutory reserves to pay for things, at some point we have to put the money back into those reserves. So the two items there, and a lot of these are, I can tell you right now, in discussions with your managers, are extremely high priority. We have fleet replacement for the fire hall, the balance of the snorkel truck, and that's already under construction, so we absolutely have to ensure that that's completed. And that's about a $387,000 item, and I think there's something else there perhaps. And then there's also, I know we need to replace a garbage truck in the Public Works Department, and that's back on your list at 140, and I believe there's another piece of equipment there. Those are items that are usually quite essential to operations, especially the garbage truck. So that's just clarification on the funding. We haven't made any other changes to this schedule.
Is there any questions? Rob?
Sorry. So sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. So are you telling, what the way I'm reading this is that our statutory reserves for 2015 we're anticipating to be 3.89 million? Is that, am I
We're
reading that
anticipating spending under the capital asset tab 3.89, not all from statutory reserves.
correctly? Okay.
That's why you have the schedules down below telling you where the money's coming
Where
from.
the money's coming from, and where am I seeing the actual totals of the reserves?
Oh, we haven't got that.
We haven't got that amount yet.
No, I have not provided that.
Okay.
I can if you
No.
need to, but
Well, eventually, but not today.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The reserves are in good shape because that's a very good question. Our reserves can certainly handle the expenditures that we're proposing in
Yeah,
this.
that's what I just wanted to cross-check. Thank you.
Yes.
Cynthia?
I'm just, in terms of your question, most of this is not coming from taxation. So it's either coming from grants or from reserve funds, most of it.
Or debt.
Or debt. So those reserve funds that we are drawing down, I'm just wondering if we can possibly, get kind of an idea of how quickly we should be putting money back into those reserve funds by kind of looking, I think if we look back, how long did it take us to, save up those savings accounts? So, if it's taken us 20 years to get those reserve accounts to that level, maybe we should be looking at a 20% contribution every year back into those funds, or finding some formula to help us to look at how quickly should we be expecting that we can replenish those funds.
Was there a question?
Should there
Yeah.
be a formula
Well,
which to replenish?
I'm going to
we draw
suggest
down?
that this year we're going to be getting to the proposed tax lift, which contemplates not a lot of money into those reserves, because in order to put money back in, it has to be incorporated into either cutting costs or raising revenues. And so to find money for those reserves often becomes a function of, do we increase taxes, or can we find other ways to find the money to put into those reserves? And this is a difficult year, and I will get to that when we get to the bottom line section, which is coming up, in terms of trying to keep the tax lift this year manageable and not putting the money into the reserves that I would normally like to see. But going forward, there definitely needs to be a plan.
And for those of us that weren't on council last term, the reason why we have a healthy reserve account is because we got a $1 million rebate from the province for the RCMP, which previous council decided to pop into reserves.
Yeah. The reserves
very reason.
are kind of a whole topic unto themselves, and I hadn't put it on the agenda for tonight because it is very complicated. I have brought some numbers with me. If you have specific questions as to what's in each reserve right now, I do have that available. I will tell you that staff had a very productive discussion yesterday. We were looking at brainstorming ways right down to possibly selling some property even that was surplus. So there's a teaser for you. But that's I would suggest isn't a topic for this evening, but I totally understand. That's a very important question you've asked.
Well, just to follow up, that is something that we've gotten right down to considering sale of property here before, which is why I'm asking to find kind of a reasonable formula that we might follow, which is, if we're expecting that we're going to, our fleet renewal turnover is, 10 years, then we need to kind of budget to be able to have that reserve back in place by 10 years. So I know I'm being very, very general, but I would like to try to have a target.
Yeah. I agree, and this is going to be a difficult year to do that. I do have some ideas going forward what we can do, but right now we're trying to get a handle on your financial statements last year were not. There were issues in terms of their accuracy, so that drove some problems for the budget process this year. And there were severe problems with A, your budget software, and B, how the budget was done last year, and we will get into that. So we are grappling with two very serious issues, and there were also some, there's always unexpected things that happen, grants that don't come through or that are eliminated or unexpected costs. But I agree with you, Councillor Day, that going forward we will come up with some. Formula isn't quite the right. It's not that cut and dried, but
so it's on the radar. But
yes.
This year is probably not an option unless
Correct.
we want to stampede in here.
Yes, that's correct.
Just a very quick follow-up, though. I've yet to meet the finance director who came and said, "Oh, it's a really good year."
Yeah.
Please don't shoot the messenger this evening,
No,
folks. I'm just here to compile the numbers.
Don't worry, Andrew. We love finance.
If I not now, but in the future, I would really like to have some sort of a prediction in terms of how this year's rates are going to impact next year, because I don't want to, not have a stampede this year just so that we can end up having a stampede next year.
So if we can, once we're done this section, I'd be happy we can get into some more detail. I'm trying to get to the exciting stuff here.
Any further questions on this? Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to new business. Hey, Andrea, 4.1.
Great. Just give me a minute here. We have a lot to juggle. Okay, section 1. Now, staff, you did hand out the budget summary, right? Okay, so everybody has a document called 2015-2019 Financial Plan. There's 3 pages and they're double-sided.
Yep.
Everybody's got that? Okay. This is what we have been working on right till 4:30 today, I'm afraid to say, because we kept discovering some issues. I'm going to walk you through it, but I'm going to do it slowly because I think you may need to ask me some questions as we go along, if that's acceptable to you, Mr. Chair.
Of course.
Yes? Okay. So the first item is taxation. The increase over last year, we're going to cut right to the chase, and I'm going to duck if I see things being thrown, is 9.2%, I know, of a tax increase. It's a good thing it's anti-bullying day. And we're going to explain in a while, after I've gone through all this, what is driving that tax lift. I know you have, Sonia, I am going to go slowly here. Our taxes, in addition to the regular property taxes, most of you are familiar with the payments in lieu of tax, which is what a PILT is, and there are some other grants that we get there. So when we add that on, we're at $14.6 million for 2015. And I've mentioned in previous meetings that our PILT amounts actually have been improving a little bit. We're conservative there because we never know exactly what's coming in, but we've been getting 95% on the dollar of what we've been invoicing the federal government over the last 2 years, and that's very successful. I do have hearings scheduled in about 2 months' time. I was just working on this as well to try and get a percentage of the $1.5 million that's owing to us. Next item is our unconditional grants, $645,000. And just to give you a flavor of what's in there, casino revenues, $300,000. We're estimating traffic fine revenues of $125,000. Small community grant of $200,000. And an age-friendly grant of $20,000, I believe, which is where the $645,000 comes from. And that figure can vary from year to year, but that's what we've got for this year. The next item is conditional government grants for $1,021,000. That figure is driven by the various projects and some of the TCA projects. So when you saw those funding sources just now on those big sheets, those numbers pull through to here, and that's what makes up these figures. So very briefly, that $1 million in conditional grants, we're proposing to use $186,000 of gas tax monies, $229,000 of federal infrastructure spending. The $186,000 actually, that's gas tax just to do with special projects. And then we have another basically $461,000 of gas tax funds to pay for the TCA projects. We have federal infrastructure monies on both of those tabs. The total amount of federal infrastructure monies we're looking for is about $275,000. And there is a small amount of money still to come in from Solar Colwood. That project is winding up at the end of March of about $95,000. Those then, in a nutshell, are gas tax, federal infrastructure monies, which are related to gas tax, and Solar Colwood. That's just over $1 million. And I like to see that there because I'd like to emphasize that does not affect your taxation. That's money coming in over and above taxation. We have another small item there to do with how we keep track of our debt with actuarial adjustments there. We have no control over that. And other revenue, I'm just trying to think, Jen, if you can help me with that one.
That includes everything from the nominal amount we collect on spring cleanup. It's various like miscellaneous charges we collect at the front counter, various contributions. I believe that $50,000 residential contribution for one of the TCA projects is pulling into that other revenue line.
So like developer contributions would be in there.
Developer contributions are down below.
Okay, sorry. Oh, right.
But any one-off contribution, so that $50,000 is pulling into that other.
So if you're okay with that, that gives us a total there for financial service of $16.9 million. And I need to point something out because something that's, I'm just trying to think, Solar Colwood is really causing us some grief here this year, right, Jen? And we're seeing that
It is.
revenue decrease quite sharply.
Yes, it is causing grief from the sense of comparing 2015 forecast versus the 2014 budget. If you look up on the conditional government grants, and then down below, when we look at the corporate administration budget, you'll see the 2014 budget dropped from 4.7 million down to 3.4. The primary driver there is the adjustment for the Solar Colwood program.
And I should just let you know what we mean by that. So last year we had booked $1.1 million worth of in-kind contributions as being revenue. Now that's non-cash, and really that shouldn't be included in our revenue. So we've had to remove it, but when we do that, it makes the numbers not look very comparable. Okay, so as Jen has said, under the conditional government grants, 2.8 million down to just over $1 million. It's because we've removed that 1.1 million. But we've also removed the same amount from the administration expense because the Solar Colwood expense was pulling in there. And that's not correct financial statement presentation. That's not actual revenue either way. Okay?
And
So,
I will just add the majority of the other revenue is the penalty we levy on the property taxes. We do count on that somewhat, and that's about $190,000.
okay, so with your permission, we'll keep going here just to understand where our revenue is coming from. We have some revenues that come in from our different departments, and that's the next section. So, development permit fees, for example, planning had a very good year. That's largely your planning revenues where you're, 2014, 2014 was a good year at $184,000. Now the difficulty is when I sit down with the managers, they all want crystal balls because it's hard to know. We look at the different developments that we think are going ahead, but you know what developers say is going ahead versus what they actually walk in the door with a check in hand to pay for the permits is a different matter, right? So we have erred on the conservative side when we've done those revenue estimates for the departments. Building permit fees are actually doing very well. Thank you, Flo, for your contributions there. That's $500,000. We did get a couple of big permits. I'm just trying to think. The hotel finally came in and paid for a permit. That was a pretty big one, wasn't it? Yeah. Again, Flo does keep a very detailed spreadsheet of the building permits, and I don't know, Flo, do you want to add just a quick comment on how you come up with that number?
Mr. Chair, it's getting back to doing some crystal ball gazing and a lot of legwork and a lot of telephone calls, talking with the development community and, faithfully, it is. I'll get a little closer. It's communicating with developers on the projects that are nearing the stage where they're going to apply for a building permit, and tempering their enthusiasm with a little bit of reality that I glean out of the business section of the paper, just trying to look at the trends in the construction industry. I think we have been fairly close on our numbers, and I'm quite happy with them. And as Andrea was saying, it's tempered with a lot of reality and conservatism.
Thanks. So we are almost done that section. The sewer revenue was causing us some grief this afternoon because we realized there'd been some inconsistent reporting last year in how things were reported. And we will be getting to the sewer budget, I'm hoping, at our next meeting. So if we can just hold questions on that one right now. So you'll see there, we're looking at revenue of $18.6 million, which is actually apparently down by 5% over last year, but remember there's $1 million that's been taken out due to solar callwood, so 1.1. So actually the revenue is fairly consistent. It's actually up a little bit. So I'd like to go now to page 2 because we've got quite a bit of information to get through here. So this is the totals that pull. We did provide you in your agenda package before you were given your budget books summaries for each department, and this does pull those totals. So our operating expenses, if we just look at the very bottom for a minute, at first you might think, I'd like to be able to say that's just grand. We've held the line, and it was budgeted at $16,075,000 last year, and we're $16,100,000. Aren't we wonderful? Well, unfortunately, there's that $1.1 million in these solar callwood expenses that we have had to remove from this year's forecast. So that's why expenditures are actually up quite a lot more, to the tune of 7.3%, not 0.2, if you'd like to know that. When we get to the payroll analysis, which is our next tab, I will go through that in detail because that is what is driving a big chunk of the increase. Each individual department we will be visiting, so again, unless you had any high-level questions, I wanted to just keep going because I want you to sort of get the flavor of how this pulls together. We have a nice graph that pulls in there that just kind of shows you our costs. Yeah?
Jason, you had a comment.
Just a quick question on interest on debt. I see it's a continually accelerating number. Is that incorporating an assumed rise in interest rates, or?
No, it's incorporating increased debt. So, for instance, this year, we are purchasing a new fire snorkel truck, and the debt incurred with that particular item is $1.35 million. And we're also looking at the Colwood Central Sewer expansion, and there's debt there. I believe it's $1 million this year and an additional $1.3 next year. So that's what drives our debt interest costs. Sorry.
Okay, sorry to belabor it, but I'm sure we'll cover this in sewer. But if we're doing a new central sewer system, why is the revenue forecast to go down for sewer revenue to go down by $300 and something thousand?
And that is where we have an issue with how it's been reported in the past. There is about, I don't even know if I want to dive into this. It's so complicated.
We're going to go through the sewer budget in detail next week because right now the comparatives of the 2015 versus the 2015 forecast versus the 2014 budget, it's comparing apples and oranges.
Okay, so Jason's question will be answered when we deal.
It will be answered next week when we go through the sewer budget in detail, yes.
You do get the gold star for the awkward question. That was the one question we knew that we couldn't deal with until we've had a chance to go in and make adjustments to make those numbers comparable, because they were not reported correctly last year is the problem. May I give you one? Okay, so that is that's page 2. Page 3, there's a bit of a graph there, and let's go right over. And I think you can sort of follow the flow. If not, we came to a total revenue figure of about $18.5 million, right? Then we had operating expenses of 16. We subtracted that, and at the bottom of page 3, the net difference is $2.5 million. Is everybody with me here? Right underneath that. Then that $2.5 million carries forward to the top of page 4. We list there the special projects that you've all just had a look at, the $803,000. We subtract that from the available surplus. We get to at the bottom of page 4, the money that's left over is 1.7. Am I going too fast?
Yeah, I think we're just trying to tie in the logic between those numbers and why.
Okay.
You know, 2.5 million is the surplus. Where that.
We're trying to show the cash flow here, so that's we have our regular revenue, we subtract our regular expenses, we take the difference, then we take the things that are called special projects or additions to core, because at this point you can say yay or nay on them. Total of 803. That leaves us with 1.7 million in change. And then we go over the page to look at where is the money coming from. And you'll see, I'm now on page 5, debt and lease proceeds of 2.3 million coming in. That's where the money comes from to help pay for the debt that we've incurred. And that's on the tangible capital assets on the next page. Yes. On page 5, we also have transfers coming in from reserves, and that just over $1 million we've just talked about, that's made up of money largely being drawn out of reserves on the tangible capital asset tab to pay for those various projects. This is a very complicated set of financial statements, and I'm sorry I don't have an easier way to walk you through this other than to go slow and have you ask questions.
Cynthia?
Just, can you explain the debt lease proceeds to me? I don't.
So basically, when we borrow the money comes in as basically a source of cash, and we use that to pay for the sewers or pay for the new fire truck.
Okay.
So that's what that number is.
Yeah.
For those two big
Yeah.
projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a lot different than going to your bank, getting a mortgage. You use the proceeds of the mortgage to purchase the asset, right?
Okay.
Okay, so that's page 5, and after we basically add that back as a source of cash on page 5, giving us now 5.1 million. We take that figure to the top of page 6, and then we have to list a number of things here. So we have principal payments on the debt. That's the use of our cash. And we do have some money going into some reserves, which is a good thing, not as much as we would like, and I know that. And then we have our tangible capital assets. If you go almost to the very bottom of page 6, you'll see a figure of 3.895 million. That's the same number that you saw on your tangible capital assets. That's all the money that we're looking to spend on capital projects. So once we do all of that math, and that was a lot of it, we get to zero. But we get to zero at a price. Okay? And the price was the 9.2% tax lift. So now I'm going to give you a little bit more work to do. We might be needing a break sooner rather than later at this rate. This is hard work here.
Gordy's exhausted.
He is.
He just said it's hard work, so.
Is that a slam?
No. Not at all. Seeing if anyone's awake. Them over there, all dying.
La da 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 da.
I got up at noon.
Yeah, typical.
If I see you slacking, I'll ask questions.
9.25%. That's preposterous.
That's ridiculous.
Ah. Let's get that.
Okay, so now everybody understands why it's 9.2%, right? So, let's take this one from the top too. At the last meeting, I was a little bit pessimistic. I told you that a 1% tax lift was, everybody remember? 120,000. Okay, very good. It's actually 114, etc. Let's just call it 115,000. But it's an important number. And what I've given you here is what we're forecasting if we did a 9.2% tax lift, and I'm certainly not recommending that, but we have to start from there to figure out what we need to do to get it down to a level that council can live with so that we don't have a, what was the word I heard earlier, riot or something in here? Okay. So we're 12,523,000 is what we've got in the document that we just went through. Last year's budget was 11,469,000, and it was interesting to note when I looked at last year's financial plan, because I thought it was just me not being very good at doing math, there was actually a 7.1% tax increase proposed last year, which was approved by council in your 5-year plan. So, look.
Because we knew we weren't going to get reelected, so we just thought.
Okay.
Down. I forgot.
So I just wanted to remind those of you whose eyebrows were up through your hairlines that it was approved at 7.1. So anyways, so what happened now? I have to focus you, right now we're going to look at the difference between last year's budget and this year's budget, and then going forward we're going to look at something else, which is actual versus budget. So last year's budget, I've mentioned this, I've tried to document it here clearly, is that there were a number one, budgeted salaries in 2014 were definitely understated, okay? So we had positions missing in communications, in IT, in the RCMP watch clerk, and the public works budget was not properly accounted for either. So there's $309,000 of salaries not in the budget. And this is why we wrestled with this year, because we're in quite a hole to start off with. If you use 114,000 in change as a 1% lift, that 309,000 translates to a 2.7% problem tax-wise right off the bat. Does everybody sort of understand the logic there? Okay. So the next item is the 2014 budgeted benefits being understated. And again, there's a number of things here. Because the entire payroll supplementals with those new positions got missed, the benefits associated with those new positions got missed. The fire department superannuation budget got a heck of a trim by at least $125,000. And budgeting for our WorkSafe, it used to be called WCB, thank you. That was missed altogether. And because we missed some public works salaries, there was also some benefits missed. So that gives us a $287,000 shortfall in benefits, which translates into 2.5% of a tax lift by omitting those. Jenn discovered something else which was of concern, which is that we had some core budget items which were funded from reserve transfers, and that should never happen. And I don't know, Jenn, if you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the main issue there is simply that it's not sustainable. So here we are in the subsequent year, and we're funding those same recurring core expenditures with tax dollars when last year we had funding from elsewhere, specifically a reserve fund. So again, it's just another explanation as to why the budgeted tax is increased over last year's budget.
It's a bit like dipping into your savings account on a regular basis to pay for the groceries, to pay for your regular. Obviously not sustainable. So then we've said, well, we know for sure that the consumer price index, like for sure, everything has gone up at least 2%. So we add that in there because that's what we had talked about when we were trying to figure out what the tax lift should be, right? I said at least 2% for that. And we also are proposing, speaking of a formula to put money back into reserves, is that we really try to put this 1% back into the infrastructure. So this is just sort of a rough idea, but to sort of give you an idea of what is driving that 9.2% is just to look at some of those big ticket items and some of those changes. So let me just think about this. I'm going to pause for a minute because I don't know if you have any other questions or if you want to go ahead. There's a lot of information I'm giving you, and it's really, really important. Like what the document we've just gone over, this is the big ticket document, and the next one to do with wages and benefits is also really essential because it will answer some of your questions as to why what looks like core has gone up about 7 or 8%.
This might be in the next section, but I had a question under the staffing positions that weren't funded. Were they all filled? Because I believe
one was not filled.
Is that in this amount of $309,000? One that wasn't filled.
Let me just think about that. I'm comparing budget to budget. So the one that wasn't filled, it is now in the 2015 budget. You see, so it does represent an increase.
Okay. Yeah. And do we know what percentage that would be?
It was half a position, I think, last year, 48,000. So that would be less than half of 1%. Say half of 1% with benefits.
Okay. And then, so the full cost is in here now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so which would be about a %.
I can assure you, we about quadruple checked the wages and benefit costs this year because we were so concerned with what we saw from last year.
Okay, so if we didn't fill that position this year, we could knock off. About a percentage or so.
I wasn't going to go to the savings yet. You get an A because you're so far ahead in the class.
Silver stars, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. These guys are just rubbing off. Okay. Go for it. So I assume that was 4.1 that we were working on, right?
That was.
Okay.
I just need a pause here to see where.
I know. No kidding. I got silver.
Yeah, so 4.2 core payroll.
Sorry, what are we on now? 4.2?
4.2, and this is tab number 5. Are we needing a break? I can hear there's some. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, this is the exciting part. So I'll ask a bit of a quiz question for you at the end to see if you've been. Okay, good. So tab number 5. Sorry, payroll. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's been a long day. Thank you, staff. My staff have to keep me in line on a regular basis. It's a big job. All right, tab number 2. What are all these numbers? Well, these numbers are important because almost 50% of your operating budget goes to wages and benefits. And I mentioned that briefly. I don't know if you've ever had an overview like this. You've seen something called payroll supplementals. Well, tonight you've got the gory details here. Wages, benefits, and broken down by department. And after I looked at this, I did a bit of a double take and thought we better come up with an analysis as to why there's been such big changes in these numbers. So in 2014, the actual amount of wages was $5.5 million. And I'm going to look at the 2015 budget for just a minute because it's gone up to $5.9 million. And I've done an analysis on that on this piece of paper that I've just handed out. Down below that is a benefits section, and it shows benefits of $1.2 million and change were actual in 2014, and what we're forecasting for 2015 is $1.4 million, which is also quite a big increase, and I've done an analysis on that because when I see such big swings, I think if I was a counselor, I'd want to know what was going on there. I certainly wanted to know as your acting director of finance. So does everybody see where I'm looking? I just read out just a few figures as reference points to go into this piece of paper, okay? And I'm going to ignore budget to budget right now. I've already put a few numbers in there to try and recreate what the budget should have been last year, but you know what? That's history. What I'm really worried about is actual. So I like to look at what did we actually spend versus based on using that, what are we going to be looking at in 2015 and just what is going on. So let's start with the salaries and wages. The difference between the 2014 actual, and I'm going to ignore that supplemental figure for a minute because we all know that's an add-on, okay? That's may or may not happen. The difference there is $351,000 between 5.5 million actual and 5.8 million budget, right? That is a 6.4% increase, almost right there. And that's important because if we're trying to say wages went up 2%, you're going to say hold the bank account. I don't think so. So why did that happen? So we know we had contract increases. They weren't 2% across the board. We had a few positions that were reclassified. And by the way, 1/4% is not a lot of money. I think that's about $14,000, okay? So $125,000 of that increase is due to contractual increases. There was a new watch clerk who started right at the end of 2014. So your 2014 figures don't include that salary. And I have to put that in there because that's what's also driving that big change from actual to budget. Okay? The other thing that happened was there was an increase in your watch clerk positions from 7 hours a day to 8 hours a day, and that was right at the end of 2014. And there's a cost to doing that of about $25,000. There was an increase right at the end of 2014, as I understand it. A bylaw officer was going to from 0.8, to 1.0. There was also a reclassification of about $1 an hour for all 3 officers. Those changes aren't that significant, but they do add up to $20,000. Something else that we did ask our managers to budget for in 2015 was sometimes people bank their overtime and they weren't budgeting for that. But you know what? If those people leave, we have to pay that overtime out. Otherwise, it's just a hidden cost that becomes a nasty surprise when people leave. So this is an effort to improve our budgeting procedures, is that we capture known costs like that are on our books and make sure that we're budgeting for them, so it doesn't suddenly come in as a $100,000 nasty surprise when we suddenly have to pay out a bunch of banked overtime. So that's why you've got a difference there of about $75,000. I'm not wanting to point fingers here, but we are helping the school district population out shortly with another child. And there is a cost in terms of the top-up for EI. So the good news is the school district is probably going to be very happy, because an additional child will probably generate about $12,000 to $15,000 in their budget. I haven't figured out yet how to recover that from the school district budget, but I'm working on it. So those figures... so those figures added up account for that big increase. Okay? So I'm not saying we like it, but that's what's driving the increase. And then to make sure that we've fully accounted for everything, because last year these supplemental salaries, as I've said, were missed, we add that in there, and then that gives you the reconciliation in terms of why your total wage expense, the budget went up in total $441,000. Everybody, I saw a bit of a blurred look there. Yep. No?
Yeah, I just had one
Yeah.
question, and it's just regarding the watch clerks.
Yeah.
And I believe the increase in hours was as a result of a negotiated contract that James had managed to carry out.
Yeah.
And I believe that was to compensate us, instead of having some predicted overtime built into the schedule, they added half an hour onto the day. So I'm wondering if there's a corresponding decrease in the overtime budget for the RCMP, because I understand that was...
We haven't seen that yet. I'm not saying it won't happen. But one of the differences between actual and budget is when we budget, we do try to budget for overtime. Now, quite often what we budget for, it's not as high as what we've budgeted. So you'll see that difference coming in. So see that $75,000 there. That's a bit of a difference between actual overtime and what we budget, because you do the best guess you can, and sometimes you get nasty surprises. I don't know if in the payroll department we've seen any change in overtime, and I don't know if you're able to answer that one, Shireen. Yeah.
No, the idea behind that was to decrease overtime, because they had 2 hours of overtime every single pay. So there's no more overtime for them unless they take somebody else's shift. But the reason from the 7 to the 8 hours was to get them to agree, because they figure that they should be based on an 8-hour day, getting their vacation time and their sick time. And we averaged to see what they work in a year, and they were kind of in between a 7 and an 8 hour. So to get them to agree to the no overtime, they came to the 8 hour. But yeah, there's no overtime for them anymore unless they take somebody else's shift. So
Okay.
Can you see this information that's on the screen, or is it too small?
That's too bad, because this is where we have all of our backup information.
Okay.
The building inspector will build.
It's in our package as well, though, right? In our tabs and stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, not all
This
the payroll.
email-
Not all the payroll, no.
That's good.
Oh gosh, now I
That's
can't.
good for me. I don't know if it works for anybody else. I can see it.
Oh, just one.
That's why our eyes are looking where they are.
Okay. Let's
Okay. So how are we doing, Andrea? Do we want to take a break
I want
now?
to just finish
Or
this
just
page,
finish
and then
this?
we can
Okay.
take a break, okay?
Great.
Because I've gone through the wage increase. Let's just finish off the benefit increase.
Yes,
Sorry, I
please.
just had one question, and that was for again on the watch clerk position. I seem to recall that our discussions last year at budget were for the $60,000 for the watch clerk to be funded from the RCMP, and I can't think of the right name for the money that they gave us. Our rebate, whatever.
Yeah.
What was it called? I can't remember.
Well,
Yeah.
that's actually not preferred budgeting procedures, because now you're going to be using reserves to fund an ongoing expense. So it might be okay for a one-time item, but this is not going to be one time. This will be an ongoing expense, so we're not funding it from that reserve. Okay. Benefits. Okay, benefits took quite a big jump there too. So we had actual of 1.2 million versus a budget of 1.4 million, approximate difference of 166,000, and that's a bit of an ouch in terms of a 13% increase. So almost half of that is being driven by the fact that our salaries and wages go up 6.3%, right? So if they go up 6.3%, that's going to drive associated benefit costs. The $75,000 that I've got in there is 22.5% on our gross wage expense. That's about what our average benefit costs are for these employees. The WCB premium, that was a bit of a double whammy. Not only did we not budget for it last year, but this year our premiums have gone up from 96,000 to another 35,000, so that's a fairly significant hit. And superannuation premiums, we have absolutely no control over those, and when they go up almost 1 percentage point, that's 1% on our gross wage expense. That's a seriously expensive $52,000. As an employer, for those employees that have a superannuation, you're paying about 10.5% is your premium on gross wage expense. And then there were some other smaller benefit increases, MSP and life insurance type of thing. So that's how we get to 166,000. And then if we also add in the supplemental benefit costs associated with possibly new positions, that's where we get to that figure. And at the very bottom, I've accounted for, when you go and look back in your workbooks and you've got this big payroll forecast analysis at the very bottom, you'll see that our actual wage costs in 2014 were over 6.7 million on a budget of 7.4 million in 2015, $623,000 difference. And I just see that's actually quite coincidental. That's equal to the tax increase. That was no sleight of hand there. But you know, that's a big chunk of change. Okay, that's the 622,000. If you divide the 115,000 into it that we were talking about, right? What does that give us? That's about 5.5–6%. So that is a big reason why we're looking at that 9.2% tax increase. And this is why I wanted to get you through these two sections, because these are the real meat of what we're grappling with here.
Thank you. Any questions before we take a break? Rob?
Thank you. So if we look at, if we look at, I looked at the wrong number here. No, but looking at the columns, if we compared actual 2014 compared to forecast of 2015, you know, there's a couple departments that stand out, and I'm just wondering if we can get some explanations, or are we expecting that we're going to get those explanations down the road?
No, we can go through that. We might be
why those specific departments.
So let me have a drink of water here.
So, for example, we're talking administration. Administration's up close to 100,000 on a forecast. Bylaws up 35,000. Finance is up 40,000.
Yes.
So all those. So I just wouldn't mind going through, just sort of, and
sure.
I understand the 2% and blah
no,
blah blah.
I actually had the same. Match. I had the same moment. So let's give it a try here. I feel like I'm losing my voice actually. Administration 785 actual, right, up to 870. There were some reclassifications there. I'm actually looking to Shireen as our payroll expert, if you can shed some advice.
The big difference there is the salary overlap for the cost between Trevor and Linda. Because Trevor is here, but we recover most of his salary back, but we still have to budget for both their salaries at about $70,000.
The recovery is in there, but the issue is the individual who owns that position is away a great deal of the time, and although we recover most of his salary, there's about 2 to 3 months of his salary that we do not recover. The union will not pay for vacation time or sick time. So on, say, $90,000, 1/6, so it's about $15,000, I would say, right there, because the recovery is in there. The recovery is not in there. Where is it? Okay. All right. That is explainable in that the recovery we get back for this particular position is shown elsewhere. So there is an extra $70,000 in there. We're getting money back in a different portion of the budget. That's the biggest reason for the difference of $85,000.
And the union doesn't cover any of the accumulated vacation for
They don't actually.
like 9 months away.
No, he pays for the time he's away on union business, but if he earns vacation or sick time, which is about 2 months of it, we do not recover that.
Oh, on that. On the
But there
time
also
they-
has been a bit of an overlap between those two positions. I'd say it's probably 4 months of wages there extra between those two. So that's admin. Finance actual last year of 606, and between that and what we're budgeting this year, there is a bit of a baby premium there, which we mentioned, which is EI top-up and a little bit of overlap. What else can we talk about?
Well, RCMPs, that's significant. It's like $100,000.
Yeah, and last year they didn't have that position. They didn't have the watch clerk there yet in... is that right? In actual, it wasn't filled to... Yeah, remember we just went through this. Remember there was that about $60,000. They filled that right at the end of the year. Oh, you failed that test. Okay.
Oh,
And then another $25,000 for the watch clerk's additional.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Gold star. Yeah. Now planning.
If I just jump through what I caught,
Yeah.
like planning's up 90,000. That seems significant.
Now, part of that is, I believe, Alan Haldenby in 2014 was not charged through to wage expense. I believe he was shown as a special project, and that is not correct budgeting. Alan is not a special project, like he's there under a recurring contract of 2 days a week. So that is driving a difference in your planning budget this year, because we have included his budget for his time where it should go. He is on contract as our approving officer, 2 days a week, and it's probably 40%, $40,000 anyways.
and that's in that planning number.
Yes, that's accounting for some of the difference.
And then
I
you-
believe there's also been a salary increase in terms of the deputy position there.
And Ivo, you had a...
There was also Sam's budget last year was split between planning and administration, but it seems that it was completely paid for by administration. So this year it's being corrected. So that's why ours is going up, and it also includes the new potentially new economic development officer. So that's for half the year.
Oh, okay.
So that
Thank
leads
you,
to that
Ivo.
Yeah,
increase.
that makes sense.
Very good. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
sorry, the last one would be Public Works for 110,000.
Yes, and
Dun.
Public Works, if you recall, on our just previous discussion, is they have definitely been, they were under budgeted last year. Our 2015 budget has been increased, and the reason for that is Public Works has a number of employees who are charged out to various jobs. This year we did a double and a triple check, because what had happened was, let's say you have 15 employees all making $100,000. You would expect the wage budget to be 1.5 million. This is the kind of math we did. But when we added together, they would guess how much time would be spent on different jobs, but nobody actually added it up to make sure it came to 1.5 million. So they were shortchanged about 150,000 by not doing that double check to ensure that when they were charging their time out to the different jobs, that they had made sure it actually added up to the total number of FTEs or the total number of budget for those positions. And that's why the budget in Public Works has gone up. We will be getting to their budget in our next meeting, and if anything has changed, I have asked actually the Public Works Manager to have one more look at that because I anticipated that question.
Carol?
Just what is going to be done going forward to ensure that there's better tracking of that?
Well, we've now set up some procedures. Our staff here is very clear. I mean, the difficulty we have is you have 3 staff at the table tonight. None of us were here last year when your budget was put together. And I can assure you that even if it's just one of us is here next year, you know, we're clearly aware of that. And part of it was, I think, dealing with new budget software, although they did have the consultant here pretty much every day last year, and we have not had that advantage. That's why it's been very tough on us, is we've had to figure this out. But that's sort of a good news, bad news story. So the bad news is it's been really tough on us having to figure this out. And the good news is we've got to the bottom of a lot of things that we wouldn't have otherwise. And I call this taking ownership. And we've been trying to take ownership of our budget so that it's not only, you know, an outside consultant that understands it, and also taking ownership of our financial statements. That's the next major challenge. Is we're now immediately, these 2 folks here are going immediately into financial statement preparation, but this leads into it. So those are the processes, the staff you have, and that we're doing it in-house.
So just following up on Carol's question, does it have something to do with the reporting that is coming from the departments as well? So, you know, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out type of deal, so making sure that it's being reported correctly?
See, we were struggling with a number of things. You took over your own payroll process, I guess 2 years ago. Is it only 1 year ago? So you had your staff grappling with a brand new payroll system, and there wasn't management oversight, unfortunately, to ensure that the checks and balances were in place, to ensure that the gross wage expense was being recorded properly and analyzed. So we've now actually caught a number of things that were not being booked properly as part of this budget exercise. We've gone back in and double-checked it throughout the payroll. And it's been a lot of challenges.
Yeah. That's all.
Nothing to do with the departments.
No, it is great news.
But the other thing is we've been trying to tighten up on our internal control processes so that you get regular reports monthly. And I mean, when Jenn came back from mat leave and I started, we almost didn't know where to start because there's been so much that needed to be reviewed. Before we can start fixing, we had to figure out what was going on or what was not going on. And 6 months in now, I feel like we're starting to make some progress.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Are we done this section, Chief? Okay, perfect. So we'll take a 5 or 7 minute break so Rob can get his Red Bull.
Yep, good.
And we'll go for an hour more.
Well, there's a reason why.
Okay, everybody, we'll get at her.
You got to collect the people in the back.
Oh, they'll hear us screaming. All right, so we have 1 hour and 7 minutes. Let's get her done. Unless Councillor Nault makes a motion to adjourn.
Early.
Yeah, I've been waiting.
Okay, so I'm happy to report, I think it's time, and you'll be happy, somebody else needs to talk now. So we've done section 4.3, and we're into 4.4, and I'm going to turn it over to Fire Chief Kerry Smith to maybe give us a bit of a run through in the fire department, and that is tab number 9.
Thank you. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just don't want to spill it. I just want to give a brief overview of the 2015 budget for the fire department. The salaries and benefits portion of the fire department budget each shows 3% increases. That's both for wages and for 3% for benefits. This includes a possible reclassification that has come forward of an FTE. It also includes additional hours for a part-time FTE, some increment increases for positions previously approved. The firefighters' agreement, they have a wage opener in their agreement for 2015, and I am in receipt of a letter wishing to take that forward. I've just put it on hold for now. And all of contingency amounts are included for all of those. The Fire Department Succession Planning Report dated February the 4th, 2014, as adopted by Council, identified the support in principle of a new firefighter maintenance position to start on July the 1st, 2015. This would allow an overlap of the current firefighter maintenance position prior to his retirement. Based on new information, this new position can now be moved forward to January the 1st, 2016 start date. A report will come forward to the Protective Services Committee asking for council approval so the process can start in the fourth quarter of this year. The part-time FTE administrative assistant is currently at a rate equivalent to 4 hours a day, twice a week. This budget asks the position double, bringing it to 4 hours a day, 4 times a week, totaling 16 hours per week. Further history and justification is included in the budget with 2 hyperlinks. The firefighters' agreement includes a wage opener. As discussed, this budget contains that contingency. Capital equipment replacement shows $35,000 to replace or rebuild our 1973 Big Brother foam trailer. After reviewing these options with the mechanic, it is felt we can best use this funding to rebuild the trailer, further extending its life. Also under the capital account is a water rescue board for the attachment to the Sea-Doo of $5,000. The bathroom renovation approved in 2014 by council was carried over into 2015. That was $22,000, but it shows on the 2015 TCA. This project is now complete as far as the budget is concerned and is $4,242 under budget. The folding wall partition for the upstairs training area scheduled for this year has been moved forward in the 5-year capital plan. The general operating accounts show a 7% decrease. Recognizing this also includes the IT portion of the budget of $4,080 that was removed to another area of the city's budget. A letter to Mayor and Council from the Colwood Firefighters Association requesting an advancement of funds for their annual grant. This is an annual request which is now being processed and received by the Firefighters Association with thanks. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Committee. We'll just take a second to
breathe.
digest that. And all the information that you just provided, it's in these sheets, right?
It is.
With the
It is
explanations.
all inclusive in these sheets.
Okay, and what's that? Is that a copy of your notes, Chief? They're up there, or?
This was the hyperlink that the chief just referred to with respect to the request to increase the hours
To the part-time FTE.
to
That's
the
correct.
part-time FTE.
So how do we access the hyperlink if we wanted to? We don't? Okay.
We can provide it to you.
We could, I'm sure we could print copies
yeah.
of it.
We can do it right now.
The two hyperlinks, one is a report of the history of the position, and the other is the actual job description.
Okay, thank you. Yes. I mean,
Just looking at page 1, when we look at reoccurring operating expenses and then the budgeted revenue over expense, so that's your actual, the 1.601 compared to your budgeted of 1.604. Is that correct? Is that what I'm looking at?
Sorry, I just have to focus here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I wasn't very clear either. So look at your expenses for 2012 budget.
Yes,
You can see that it's 1.604,
1.604, yes.
and then right below it is budgeted revenue over expense, 1.601. So is that your actual? Is that actual? Is that what they actually spent?
If you look up above, the fire department collects a very small amount of revenue to the tune of $3,750.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the little bit of revenue they collect and their budget, which
Okay.
gives you a $1.6 million theoretical deficit. I don't think they're ever going to pay for themselves.
Right. So no. So I guess no. My question, I guess, is I'm trying to see where their actuals are. Where am I missing? Where are their actuals for 2012, 2013?
Oh, I see. Okay. They're individually on these sheets. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just want to check something here. Yeah, I don't believe we provided you with actuals last year either.
Okay. Well, I'm just
Yeah,
the
in the
reason
work.
I ask is I'm just
Yeah.
curious where, and maybe the chief knows. How does your budget to actuals line up?
I was under budget a fair amount, actually, enough to cover the superannuation issue out of my budget. And there's a number of reasons for that. One was our SCBA bottles were not replaced this year because, and that's the tune of $14,900. There's a long drawn out reason why for that, but they will be purchased this year. There was also $15,000 for a consultant because I was not sure going in what we were going to be bringing forward. There's a fire prevention bylaw that was going to be coming forward. So that's been trimmed down this year to $5,000. Trying to think of the other big ticket items.
Well, and I guess where I'm, if I may.
Yes.
Sure. I guess just where I'm going with this is that these numbers are probably really quite realistic, that you'll probably be within $10,000, $20,000 normally. Like, is that sort of how your budgets normally line up? Is it fairly predictable?
It's actually been under budget. Unfortunately, it's not predictable. It varies from year to year, and it also varies for a number of reasons. Call volume, it varies for the amount of people that we have on the department, and this year we'll have more people on the department than we've ever had.
Yeah.
We'll be up to 40. We've been around 34. Volunteers are volunteers, but they don't
still
come
cost
for
us.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
I'm good. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you. Chief, what's the, I'm just looking for the cost of the clerical or admin support increase. Was it 11? Sure
I
it's in here
don't
somewhere.
believe it's separated in here. I'll need a little bit of help from the Director of Finance.
Makes sense.
Yes. Okay, and I do apologize. I just realized we didn't touch on the payroll supplementals, and that is under tab 2, I believe. So in tab 2, we looked at the payroll forecast and that variance analysis, and there's another sheet in there with small print,
Oh, yes.
and that shows a new fire assistant right at the top, and an increase to that position of $11,032 for the current year,
Okay.
with benefits associated with that of $1,875.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I can just add a comment, I just realized that it would be helpful to have those actuals. I know you can't see them from there, but we are going to just reprint those workbooks right now so that you can refer to the actuals on that summary sheet. I think you'll find that helpful. Okay?
Okay. So I think we'll move on, and it's not to say that if a question doesn't come up, we can always ask, but this is more of a review than anything, and we can drill down. Yep.
May I just ask one final question? And it just popped into my mind, Chief, just because you mentioned that you're going from 34 to 40. Do we anticipate that are we going to need to spend additional money on equipment? Like suiting the actual officers or the firefighters out now that the number's going up?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. And there has been some manipulation within the budget, so there's been some reductions in certain areas and additions in other areas to compensate for those things that are actually required, like the extra turnout gear and extra money towards the firefighters banquet because it comes on a per head basis.
Where are we?
The one I don't get invited to?
That's the one.
Me neither.
Yeah, you're not getting invited this year.
At least he's got a jacket to wear when he's out in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
It looks good.
So, Andrea, we should move on then, I guess?
I think we should if
Okay.
you're done with the fire department. So the next department is bylaw.
Oh, Cynthia had a quick.
Yeah, just a quick point. Just when I was looking at this, I thought that perhaps the really small salary and wages consolidated supplementals. I thought that the person's name should be removed because this is being put out to the world more or less.
Okay.
And I just didn't understand the pay CY1, CY2. Is it cycle? I have no idea.
That's sort of the convention that we use to keep track of the different fiscal years. So 2014 is current year, CY plus 1 is 2015, etc.
Okay.
So we,
That's a good question.
I was so concerned about ensuring the money got included in the budget this year that I might have overlooked a couple of the
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we're glad you did.
presentation features.
Just a point, only because I was worried that in future, could be a problem for somebody.
So, who's taking on bylaw? Are they?
We can, I think,
down.
postpone that to next budget meeting.
Sounds good. So, it looks like Flo is on the hot seat way down there.
Trying to sneak in his banquet.
That's right. So, that's.
So what we're providing right now is summary sheets that have actuals, because I think that'll be helpful.
So, tab 6 is building department.
I'm not sure. Shireen, have you got the fire and building department there? Or
Building
just
is coming.
okay, building's coming right up.
Thank you.
But you might as well get started.
To the chair, as we mentioned earlier, the building department has managed to exceed our revenue expectations in 2014, primarily to some larger projects that have gone on stream, and one of them was, although it may not be apparent, but the half of the building permit for the high school was paid in the beginning of January in 2014. So that is reflected in this number and caused the 2014 actuals to come up somewhat. For 2015, in terms of revenues, I'm projecting in the vicinity of $550,000, which is a slight reduction from our 2014 budget, but it's quite conservative in terms of the actuals for 2014, in excess of $100,000. And a lot of that is driven by, again, just being quite conservative in that with the world financial and political situations, if something happens in Syria or there's a problem with the Chase Manhattan Bank, it really ripples down through our industry very quickly. So we try to be extremely cautious there. In the expenses side of things, from 2014 actual to 2015 forecast, we have approximately a $10,000 increase. And I don't see any one thing that's really driving that, just general increases all around, I believe, in terms of cost of living and the like. At the bottom, you'll see that we're also forecasting for 2015 a revenue over expenses surplus in our department. I'll invite any questions. Thank you.
So, any questions for the Gold Star recipient for bringing in more money than is being spent?
Profit sharing?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. We'll just take a sec to have a boo at. Rob, you had a.
Thank you. So if we look at budget 2012 and then forecast 2015, just at salaries. So sorry, we're about $100,000 more in 3 years in salaries.
Less?
No,
Are we not?
it's less.
Right here.
It's less.
160.
I believe this was one of the few departments, if I may, I don't know how the budget was arrived at for salaries and wages, to be honest. It's $395,000 in 2012. And then it was...
Maybe I'm looking, oh, you know what? I'm looking at bylaw. My apologies.
Yeah, building
I
is...
yeah, well,
Yes.
I was told tab 6.
It is after that.
Never mind.
After the blue divider.
Yeah, there you go. That looks great.
Now, in regards to the difference between budget for 2012 and budget 15, there were some anomalies in the budgeting in that they were still carrying Gary Joel on the pay. Well, he was showing up on the budget sheets, even though he was on LTD, and this was skewing some of the numbers back then. And I don't know if any of that translated into 2014 or not, but there was an issue there that we sorted out, and so we're on track now.
That's a double gold star to the building department because his expenses have actually gone down and revenue exceeds expenses. 2 stars.
Ding, ding. Yes, Rob.
So, Flo, when you're calculating out permits, you know, it seems to me like it's pretty consistent year over year, and I understand that 2012 there was that big drop, and I understand economically. But we do have, you know, some major projects coming online, you know, Capital City Centre and Royal Bay. Are we not truly anticipating that those budget, like, are you being very conservative with these numbers, or are you, like, how are you forecasting those?
Well, there is a link, a hyperlink that has my my breakdown of projected revenue for 2015, specifically with Capital City Centre, which is now owned by Omni Group. In my discussions with them, they are currently in the internal planning stage for their project, and I believe, firming up interest with, potential tenants on the space. And I was informed by them that if anything, they would take out a permit at the latter part of this year to complete the foundation. When I asked about the likelihood, and he said it was quite uncertain if it would happen in 2015. So I didn't include that because I'm not getting the warm and fuzzies over that. In terms of the Royal Bay projects, I've included 21 new single-family dwellings in the first phase of the development. I'm including, in addition to that...
Excuse me, Flo, we've actually got it up here. I know it's but if it would help you, you could actually come over here if you...
Or I could get it, well...
We've blown it up as big as we could just so council can possibly see, okay?
Maybe if we had mental mental benefits like the City of Victoria is asking for, we could get a good size here.
So on the, well, I will just sort of go through this online. So line 60, we've got the 21 SFDs that will be for, it's not a lot of revenue, but it's still revenue nonetheless. This is P665 Super, and we're looking at potentially two houses coming online from that subdivision
Flo, may I interrupt you just to stay on Royal Bay just for a moment? And this may fall back into also planning, so EFO, maybe you can help me too. I remember at one point they were talking about paying for an additional planner or something to help facilitate things moving faster. Did they ever throw or suggest that they were going to give money to the city to have an additional inspector to keep processes going? Or Michael might know that answer.
The answer to that is when they take out permits, they're paying for the building department time. And as you can see, because our receipts are bigger than our outgoings, they are paying for it.
Well, oh, yeah, and I'm not suggesting they're not, but it's just, I remember, EFO, did we not hire somebody last year? Or did they not pay for somebody last year?
They paid, we picked someone to help us, and they paid for them to help Colwood staff go through the process because they had quite a strict timeline.
But we're anticipating that they won't actually help pay for a salary position. They'll pay it through just the permits.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it.
That's why if all of these things far exceed expectations, you'll see a jump in revenue, and we'll be back here saying you need another inspector.
Right.
And here's the revenue to justify it.
Right.
But we're not going to do that until we actually see the revenue.
Right. Great. Thank you.
So line 8 is from the way that's, again, tied up with the Super project, and I don't see a lot of potential for development. Pelican, there's 18 lots left, and I'm guessing at 3, that's $600. Royal Bay, that's the Pelican area up there. Home, we have a few lots left there, so that's 11,000 revenue. Hawkwood Resolution, I'm thinking about half the lots that are left there, yes, that's the 30,000. Regency, again, that's on Wisher, and we're looking at another 10 single-family dwellings, and that's the indication that the builder has given that they would be putting on this year. Blue Sky is beautiful as a subdivision is. The lots are quite expensive, but I'm hoping for a way to ban. I'm looking at 3 houses up there. Robson Place, it's the same. Scroll down a little bit, please. Nothing for Olympic View, Mariana, nothing, Victoria. So look at 53 Victoria.
That's the clear cut, isn't it?
That's the clear cut.
Pardon me?
That's the clear cut where they're doing all the blasting rock.
Yes.
I'm sort of just looking at the progress of the work that I'm thinking we're going to see lots of this year. Okay, this here is one we use here. Nope. All right. Well, this is going to be a bit past
city own that? Don't we own that now? I thought that failed, or I thought that went to tax sale. And nobody bid on it.
Which is
It was a $60,000. Yeah. Well, it's upside down on the mortgage, so I don't think they're going to. So I think it's going to revert back to the city. Which makes me feel horrible that I didn't pay $60,000 for that $2 million
You're not
piece of
allowed to.
property. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's a lottery ticket.
So total residential revenues are projecting at $350,000. Getting into the commercial side of things, this is we collected $22,000 on the remainder of the hotel building permit fee in January. Institutional, we're going to have a seismic upgraded residence building, that's another $50,000, roughly speaking. So which gives me a building construction for new construction of 421. And when I do these, I factor in 8% of the value of new construction for, in addition, or to be supplemented with 8% building permits based on this value. And similarly, I add 8% of new construction value for renovations and additions. And it's, over the years, it's been fairly constant. So we arrived at a number on our budget of 440 for permit revenue. And in addition to that, in this bailiwick of fees, we've got what else? We have oil tanks, and plumbing, and alarm, and business licenses all in here for $40,000. That's sort of revenue in a nutshell.
Hey, thanks, Flo. Any questions? No. Seeing none. All right, Andrea, I guess we'll move on, eh?
All right, so this is just behind tab 7. So we have consolidated the core IT budget, and I'll just start under recurring operating expenses. You see the salaries line item. Now this is one of those positions that's within the payroll supplementals. This is a request. So in the 2014 financial plan, the city received approval for basically a 12-month IT manager auxiliary position. And we have brought this forward again as a request for an ongoing permanent position. And that's represented on that line there. And then the remainder of the core budget, the general expenses budget of $200,000, that represents a support budget of $140,000. And I can go through the details in that in a second, as well as our IT hardware replacement budget. And that was, inadvertently omitted from the 2014 budget, so that explains the jump there from the $150,000 to the $195,000. But Langford IT, with our staff's assistance, they maintain a list of every staff member and their IT hardware, and then it's slated for replacement every 3 to 4 years or so. And so we factor those costs into the core budget. And the support figure, if you flip over to page 2 of 3 of your IT core expenses, you can see all of the various components there. So the bulk of that budget, and we've got approximately $50,000, which goes towards the City of Langford for the assistance that they provide us. And then we have another $20,000 just in the licensing fees with Microsoft. And then you can see the various other components, so various software licenses and software supporting and webcasting and that kind of thing. And that basically summarizes the IT budget. We'd gone through the special projects at the last committee of the whole meeting. So this year, that special project represents the request for a conference phone for the committee room there, an additional laptop that wasn't within the desktop refresh program, as well as a backup server at the city's fire hall.
If I could just add a comment as well, just to be clear. What was approved last year in the budget for salaries, unfortunately it didn't make it in there, so it's zero, but it was approved as a 12-month contract to go from July of 2014 until June of 2015. So you have actually approved part of that position, but I wasn't quite sure where council wanted to go, so we're starting over again. And the amount that is being requested as a payroll supplemental is for half of a position for 2015 of $49,000 for an IT, whether you want to call it a manager or a coordinator, because right now we do have staff that are trying to look after the IT function kind of off the corner of everyone's desk. It's not working well. And when we pulled this budget together, I don't want you to think we've suddenly increased expenditures on IT. It's just that we've centralized it in one sheet. And as we did that, it was a very useful exercise to see how each department needed different software, but maybe they don't. Maybe we can look at some coordinated approach to software that will be used across our departments. Otherwise, the danger is each department goes out and individually purchases something possibly in isolation of the other departments. And so we have had a management meeting about this, and if any other managers want to step up here, it's a really important piece that we're missing is a IT plan. We can't find one, and we are supposed to have one in terms of our contract with Langford, and we need to improve our communications. That's a huge problem, is that there hasn't been good communications with them in terms of regular meetings, and us basically setting some standards of service and making sure that if we have them, that they're actually being adhered to, and a coordinated approach in terms of who actually asks for help. Engineer Michael, I think, has something to say.
Yeah, I think there's been a huge thing missed here in not having these regular meetings with Langford, and that's probably because the responsibility for IT was kind of floating around, and I was never sure who was supposed to be calling those meetings. I'm not sure if the CAO at the time was, but there have been very few of them, and I think we're going to get better service by having those meetings. But I also know that our record of implementing software without that coordinating, even supervising a person of an IT expert in the building has not been good. And I think we're going to find it really, really difficult to come into the 21st century if we don't have that.
Thank you. Carol?
Yep, and I think maybe former council help think here on things too. I think that there was discussion around kind of tying communications and IT together at one point when we were talking about things, and then once we got there, we clearly identified that there was going to need more than that. So that's when the discussion around an IT review that included what Langford was already doing for us, and then with changes out of CAOs, I think it just might have been kind of sidelined. But I know there's something niggling at me.
Jason?
Yeah, I have a general question on this. The total general expenses for the IT is shown as about $150,000, so $195,000 for 2015. Should we not be seeing $195,000 in savings in the other departments if they've all been transferred into one IT department? I was wondering if the individual department budgets reflected that.
Yes, they do. So the majority of this transfer was pulled out of the corporate/administration general expenses line item. They previously housed the IT support budget, and then there was a minor transfer out of both the building and the fire core budgets of less than $5,000 apiece.
Can you show me where on the budget sheet those numbers would be found? Because I see an increase in operating expenses for every single department. I'm just wondering where the $195,000 in savings shows
It's
up.
offset by other increases. So when we go through the admin department in detail, we can compare last year's summary with this year's summary. But that was pulled out of the administration budget.
For example, Jason, if you were to look in the administration department summary, under their expenses, there's a line there called IT services. And there was a budget in 2014 of $150,000 for IT. Okay, so that's the biggest chunk of it right there. And then there's various software that we've, whether it's licenses or some software requests that we've pulled out of the different departments.
There you go. IT.
Okay, this is a coordinating effort again because as we looked at this collectively as staff, we went, we probably need a coordinator first, then we need a plan before we start buying software left and right to make sure that it's thoughtful and that it actually is helpful to more than one department. Because some of the things I've seen coming in here new to your organization, you really are behind the times. You don't have a portal available, for instance, for your citizens to use. And that portal can be used to pay taxes, to inquire about the status of a development permit, for example, to look at paying for dog licenses, building permit fees. Like, the idea is that it pulls together all those citizen services, and we are a very long ways from doing that right now without that infrastructure.
Cynthia.
I could just say, just on that item, we certainly identified quite some time ago. I'm trying to think how many years ago it was. It may be 3 years ago. Looking at, we talked about software issues and which softwares, which department preferred. We talked about trying to get to a status where you could pay your taxes online, so the portal that you're talking about. And for various reasons, it has been sidelined, and I can just say that I do believe that the lack of an IT coordinator is costing the city in productivity. And a really good example of that would just be last week I was trying to get any computer here to work for me. Ended up having to sit at Marcy's desk to do a report for council. And she had just had a new version of her software installed, so it wasn't talking to anything. I couldn't email a document from Pat's computer to Marcy's computer and be able to open it. Simply because of newer versions where, without thinking, Langford IT has said, yes, go ahead, there shouldn't be any compatibility problems. But when push comes to shove and there is a compatibility problem, we have nobody to go back to and say that wasn't good enough. So they might be great at making sure that we don't lose data on our server, or I'm not sure what else, but on the day-to-day operations, we're losing a lot of time with people trying to manage the IT issue without a central person.
Any further questions? Okay. So somebody's going to communicate with us. Is that the next?
Yes. Sandra.
Paint a pretty picture.
Thank you. So behind the red sheet on that same tab, you'll see the communications information. It's fairly straightforward. According to this, it looks like I volunteered for the past year, so you're welcome for that. Cha-ching.
Got us excited.
Most of the general expenses in this item.
Yeah.
Most of the general expenses are actually pulled from the administration budget. So for things like mileage, a little bit of training, newsletter, public relations, some promotional material. Most of that was already in place in administration, was just put in this communications budget for this year. There are a couple of small items, like a camera for the department and some new tables for this for chamber and committee room that have wheels so we can move them around and stuff. Simple stuff like that. And then, of course, the special project things, which we've looked at in a separate issue. That's about the bulk of my information.
Committee, any questions? No? That was well communicated. Thank you.
Well done. Thanks for sitting through 4 hours so you can do a 30-second presentation.
So now that the Director of Planning has swooped in, I guess he's the next victim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would have been here sooner, but I had to change out of my jammies. So.
So this is tab 8, right?
Okay. So EFO mentioned that we've already discussed the fact that our salaries have increased significantly in planning, and it sounds like you've already gone over the rationale for that, some changes in the way that the salaries have been calculated. Our admin assistant's position is now properly split between administration and planning as it had meant to be before. Alan Haldenby, the contract approving officer, is now sitting with planning, and we've got the new economic development officer proposed position in planning. So net of those changes, our overall increase in salaries and benefits is around 2.4%, which aligns, as I see it, with the expected increases with the collective agreement. Our general expenses are relatively in line with 2014. We're seeing about a 1.3% increase. That is due to an increase in memberships, the cost of our very highly qualified planning team and their membership in professional organizations. That's about $1,000 increase there. There's also an increase in our proposed training budget. As you all know, we've got several folks in new positions, including myself, and we're hoping to take advantage of some educational opportunities this year. The rest, a lot of the project items and whatnot have already been addressed, so I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point. Thanks.
Rob.
Thank you. Ian, sorry, I don't actually understand the salary and wages because the economic development officer I know was going to be half-time for 2015 and then full-time 2016, but we're actually seeing a close to $40,000 decrease in that. So I don't know why. Where are we making up? So that's almost a shift of close to $120,000 in difference between that. So why are we so high in 2015 compared to if we're forecasting out to 2016?
Sure. So I'll go over it in detail. So our admin assistant position, which was always meant to be a split between 50% planning, 50% admin, has been correctly accounted half to planning, and that's $35,250. Alan's position, which was previously budgeted as a special project, Alan's special, but he's not a special project. He should be part of our ongoing salaries, and that's $28,025. And then the new economic development officer position is $48,546 for a grand total of $111,821. That makes up the bulk of all of that salary and benefit increase.
So that's the increase for 2015, but what Rob's saying is you actually see a decrease in 2016, and that's where there's also a full year of the economic development officer would kick in. So we think it would...
Yeah, it should go up, not down in 2016.
And we're checking on that because I'm just wondering if something didn't pull through there. We may have put it in for the current year and it didn't get pulled forward to the future.
Well,
So-
and if I may,
Yeah.
what I'm concerned about is if you're looking at if you forecast all the way up to 2019, even 2019, we're not spending as much money as we are in 2015. So it
Looks like something's not pulling. Yeah.
Good catch.
Thanks.
That's a relief. I thought Aoife was going to get some bad news there.
Evo, we love you. Any questions? Cynthia?
Thanks. Probably this isn't entirely the right place for it, but I just wanted to throw a placeholder out there in regards to, you mentioned you have a young team and you want to do take advantage of some education opportunities, which I think is great. But I would like to see that come back to council with an education plan for your department, so that we can be on board and supportive and happy about the choices that all the departments are making. I really think that, I know we're short-staffed a CAO at the moment, but I think that if we had a CAO, that would be something I would be asking for, was to look at a citywide education plan, because there are limits and there are needs, and maybe through a plan we could do some balancing.
Thank you. Oh, Ian, sorry.
That's actually a great point, and we have itemized the training, the proposed training, and it's pretty straightforward. I've already discussed with the previous council the perceived need for myself to get some training as I am alternate approving officer, and we propose that the bulk of my training would be the approving officer course. But really, they're largely in line with other departments. We are already coordinating that, and we are identifying some of the current knowledge gaps and opportunities in our work plan that we're preparing at the moment.
The salaries is correctly pulling in this version, but for whatever reason in the printed version it was incorrect.
Okay, so yeah, that looks, love to say that looks better, but it's correct. Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we probably have time for one more, and that would be the engineering department before we'll look at wrapping up.
Do that in 20 minutes there?
I would think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, let's get started, and we'll see how we've done a heck of a job, so I appreciate the committee's diligence.
I'll just talk about the general expenses first. That's actually gone down from 14 to 15, but then it had a big increase, 13 to 14, so it's no great. Which tab? Sorry, we're on tab 10. So no great achievement there, but we have itemized the more expensive items in our general expenses so that you can see what the breakdown is. And a lot of both memberships and training revolves around acquiring the ability to do GIS in the organization at a level that will, provide information to every department instead of just providing maps. Now, mapping and IT are cousins, because mapping these days is very, very digital intensive, and this whole switch to digital mapping so that it's available to everybody and that it's connected to your property database and that type of thing is going to need that IT support again. This is engineering doing the mapping, but not the implementation of the software. I'm looking at the page 1 of 7 and page 2 of 7 under tab 10. First two items, memberships and training. Okay, so the rest of the general expenses budget is fairly minor. And I think I've spotted a couple of a place where we could cut $500 and a place where we seem to be missing $500. I've just been going through an exercise of trying to find places to cut money. Yeah, but I've done better in Public Works. I think we got about Andrea and I agreed on cuts of 160,000 earlier today, and I think I found another 50,000.
So if you just unhide the,
Yeah.
it's there, you can just unhide it on the summary tab.
Can you see that okay?
So talking about salaries, I'm surprised I didn't get a question about this right at the beginning, because I'm baffled by these numbers, and Andrea and I went over them a little bit this morning, but we've got one more work to do. And so maybe we can, unless Andrea's got an answer.
Sorry, are you on engineering or?
Engineering, yeah.
We'd have to, I didn't realize you were baffled by engineering. It was Public Works we were talking about this morning.
Baffled by salaries.
Just the salaries, because there's a 6.6% increase from 2013 to 14.
In the engineering department salaries.
And then 8.6 from 2014 to 2015. And the only addition was last year, a half-time administrative.
Do we have actual up? Because I think the problem is in 2014, I'm not sure how accurate that budget is, but I don't think you filled the position either. So.
That's right. It wasn't filled.
The position was
No, but it was in the budget.
No, it wasn't. It was approved, but there was no dollars in the budget.
So then how did we get a 6.6% increase from 2013?
That
So it
will
looks
take
like
a
we
few
might have found
minutes.
some more money.
I say we shut down finance for 6 months and then we're good.
I don't know.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a little bit more work
Okay.
to.
Well, yeah, we didn't have that. I didn't have that question clearly from you, or I would have
That's
looked
right.
it up.
It was confusing. We talked about Public
It was
Works.
Public
only
Works
this
we were
morning.
talking about this morning, not engineering. I didn't realize you had a
Yeah,
question.
Sorry.
We'll let you guys work on that.
Yeah.
There could be some good news out of
Plus
that
or
nugget.
minus $5.
That's not the biggest dollar value, I'm afraid.
No.
Gold stars.
Looking for the flagship ever right now. Okay, Michael.
Right. Thanks.
Is that it?
That's it. That's all there is to it.
Carol?
Yeah, on page 2 of 7, up at the top on training, conferences, conventions, whatever. Is there a better definition for organizational change and professional development? I thought all of these were professional development.
That's the $5,000 item, Royal Roads.
What is it?
I believe that was the course Emmett wanted to take at Royal
Yeah,
Roads.
that's a course on organizational change. Oh, and the professional development is my association's planning to make it mandatory that I attend professional development courses. I mean, I've always attended some, but in order to get the right points, I'm going to need to do a bit more formal training.
And you found something at Royal Roads?
No, mine is the professional development, and it's just labeled generally professional development because that's the requirement. And it'll depend what courses come available that carry the right points.
The organizational changes for Emmett.
If I could add a comment there. A number of your positions require professional qualifications. So it's almost like the membership and the required professional development perhaps should go together. Like, I'm in the same boat as Michael and as Jen. When we have a professional accounting designation, in order to maintain it, there's annual fees, which Colwood pays, which we appreciate, but also there's mandatory professional development. You have to get credit for so many courses every year. It's not optional. So that is almost part of a membership fee in a way, if that helps.
The same holds true for the Building Inspectors Association.
And I would assume something in the way of planning as well would be appropriate. So we might be better. And fire, I don't know how, like, again, allocating the right spots.
Yeah, in future, if council has some concerns about the amount spending on training, we could possibly bundle those mandatory items along with your membership fees.
Okay. Any other questions? Rob?
I'm still confused. Have we figured out why there's a $60,000 difference between budget of 2014 and budget 2015, or is that it's just polling wrong again?
Staff are going to go back and have a discussion.
Yeah, are we, you guys are fixing that.
We're kind of reaching our max, I think, mentally here. I'm thinking
No,
we're
no,
kind of at a.
as long as, like,
yeah,
I
I've made a note,
I'd be
and
comfortable with it if
I was just going to ask the chair. It's actually a good.
Break.
Can't talk. It's a good time to sort of break for the next meeting, because Public Works is a very large department.
Yeah, and that's what my thought was too. So, great minds. So if there's no further questions, Mayor?
Just one, and again, following up on what Councillor Day had indicated on page 3 of 7, we have a name in there under office.
Sorry.
It happens to be yours. Yeah, it may not be something that's open to.
Oh, okay.
Cynthia?
I just wanted to make a wrap-up comment. What a phenomenal experience it is going through the budget this year. This is my 13th budget, lucky 13, and I'm feeling more informed and less lost than ever before at this point in time. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah, totally.
Woohoo! And thank you for saying that. It's sometimes kind of long hours, and I'm not taking all the credit by any means. We have a couple of extremely hardworking team members and a few folks behind the scenes. Long hours. So thank you.
And just to reiterate, the summary was provided to the public, but these detailed pages were not provided to the public. It's just staff and council.
Yes. All right, so that will be it tonight. Do you want a motion to refer the rest of the items to the next week's meeting?
So moved.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Motion to adjourn? Woo! All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, guys. Good meeting.
Was that Shireen over there in the front? So, obviously, somebody left a note there. I think it looks like Andrea left a note for Shireen, and it wasn't deleted.
I was in bed reading books to Mari and put my piano bottom on. He's like, let's go really quick. I didn't expect to go through the thing.
Well, we've never got to engineering in the first night ever before. And usually it's been kind of 4.5 hours. We still haven't got to engineering.
She's done so much upfront work that a lot of it's answered by me.
Yeah. to take this with me, of course. Has it got the sewer budget in it? Yeah, sewer fund. There we go. Yeah.
It doesn't have the detail though. The biggest issue we've found
Yeah.
is the sewer parcel tax.
Yeah.
Sorry, not the parcel tax, the sewer user fee.
Hmm.
One of the biggest things it funds is that component of the CRD requisition that's the Northwest operating
Yeah.
costs.
And that's normal.
And that was excluded in the financial plan last year. Like, because it was a transmission, like typically all the taxes we levy on behalf of other jurisdictions and the corresponding transmission are excluded from the financial plan.
Yeah.
The complication with the CRD requisition is that two components of the transmission are funded through both a parcel tax and the user fee.
Yeah.
So the corresponding, and that's exactly what Jason picked up on, was why did the revenues look like they dropped so much?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm gonna outline it all tonight just to make darn sure that everything reconciles within the budget.
Yeah.
And I had notes that there were certain aspects of the operating expenses and certain salaries that were funded through the collection fees, and I don't know if that's relevant anymore. And then I also had notes that, like the sewer expansion fees that we may collect and the sewer enhancement fees, that those really don't fund anything. Those are to be transferred directly to reserves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'll outline it all anyway in writing and then send it to you.
Great. As I say, I'll take this with me, but if there's any other sheets you need to send me,
Yeah,
just
okay.
email them and I'll find a way to get them over there.
Okay.